Hi everyone, Basthany God Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Interpol album, El Pintor. This is the 5th full-length LP from famed indie rock outfit Interpol. The band's first 2 albums and initial EPs are fantastic. Highly recommend that you listen to them. The band took a very punchy, hook-driven approach to the darker side of post-punk music. All of this happened in the early 2000s. A lot of people refer to this time as a bit of a revival for post-punk music. On Interpol's 3rd record, which is maybe their most ambitious full-length LP, the band brought in a lot of additional instrumentation, really filling their sound out, making their songs a little more grandiose. And even though the reception on this record is a little mixed, this album has some of Interpol's most epic material yet on it. But then artistically in 2010, the band really folded with a self-titled album. It was like listening to all the bells and whistles and experimentation of their last full-length record turned up a little bit, but without the rock edge or the great songwriting. Not to mention around this time, the band's longtime bassist Carlos D had also departed from the band. Paul Banks had a solo album come out not too long after. He had a weird experimental hip-hop electronic mixtape drop as well. Like 2009 to 2013 is a really weird time for Interpol. So it is so weird to think that after all of that oddness, Interpol would come back in 2014 with an incredibly safe record. Not that Interpol has ever been super pioneering. No, instead they were a band that had great performances and great songs, great albums. And maybe with the release of their 4th full-length album, they came to realize that, and now they're kind of back to focusing on what has always made the band good. Their simplicity, their passionate vocals, their dramatic, propulsive drumming, the shimmering, climactic, and very well-layered guitars, the rock-steady bass lines. El Pintor is a pretty good record, and it's because it works with the same winning formula that Interpol's best albums already have. It's like if you really love Coca-Cola and you drink a can of Coke and you think it's great, the next time you crack open a can, you're gonna think it's great too. I guess it just depends on whether or not you want to hear Interpol backtrack a little bit on this new LP. And I think doing this is so easy for them because their best material isn't really that far behind them, so it's kind of easy for them to rekindle the magic of those earlier records. That spark just catches so easily. It's like they just flipped a switch on this album and it's like, oh, voila, they sound great again. This LP is basically the album that should have come out 4 or 5 years ago. But even in that context, it still would have sounded a little bit like Interpol repeating themselves. Still, I do end up enjoying tracks like All the Rage Back Home. All the Rage Back Home. Really good drum beat, propulsive bass lines on that track, really nice hook. The fade out's a little disappointing, but it's still a good track. I like My Desire, Ancient Ways, Tidal Wave toward the back end of the LP, which is maybe one of the more sonically dense tracks on the entire album. It really does recreate that sonic sensation of a tidal wave. And I think we as fans of this band can argue the finer points of songwriting from this record to their earlier records. After all, there weren't that many lyrics that really came out and grabbed me on this album. Paul Banks, his voice is a little mired in reverb on this record in comparison with some of Interpol's earlier stuff. There are tracks like Anywhere that sort of have a very abrupt ending, then New Town, New Story, which has one of the most grossly awkward guitar parts that kicks the song off and continues through much of the track too. But still, in terms of the sound, the performance, the structure of these tracks, Interpol has still got it. I guess in my opinion though, it's just not as exciting as it once was. I guess not as exciting as listening to this. But that is most likely because I am so intimately familiar with this. While I do think this is a decent album, wouldn't mind listening to it again, considering the outright lack of surprises or evolution on this LP, it does feel like the tiniest of cop-outs. I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this album. Tran? Musician, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, El Pintor, forever.